Hey Rick Beato, stop with the nostalgia. You have some serious amnesia. When we were young, listening to music was tinny. Like it was crap. Your kids, my kids, they cannot imagine. I'm not talking about the melody, harmony, or lyrics. I'm talking about listening to it. It was hissy, muddled, and scratchy. Great music, but it mostly sounded like garbage anywhere but on some rich friend's stereo system. None of us would go back and listen to music on the simple transistor radios and cassette players we had in the 1970s. Would you, really? We could have no idea at that age just how revolutionary transistors were, how they would lead to the ability for everyone to listen to music everywhere and anywhere and at any time. We could have no idea that the transistor was creating a huge music industry that would rise and fall in our lifetime. You argue that music from the 60s and 70s was great, that music today isn't so great, but maybe that's an illusion. We have to face the truth. Let me explain. For all of human history, until around 1700s, we had stringed instruments, recorders, flutes, and some organs. Then, in the 1700s, technology evolved into pianos and orchestras. Societies matured. You'd had patrons of the arts, large concert halls. Then in the 1930s, the electric sound amplifier matured. It was to music what Gutenberg's press was to books. As incredible as that was, the 1960s was even more revolutionary. Portable music. Portable music players anyone could afford. Again, hissy, tinny, and scratchy, but we didn't care. These devices created a unique situation in all of human histories where it was very expensive to create recorded music but inexpensive to listen to it. Let me repeat. We had a 30-year period from around 1930 to 1990, 60 to 90, when the demand for recorded music outstripped the supply. The music of our generation was recorded on equipment that musicians couldn't afford. Now, the Beatles built a studio in 1969, but they were the Beatles, the exception. The tape used by musicians to record their albums or singles ran about $50 a minute in today's dollars. Even today, how many musicians would we have if all music was stored on that Ampex media for $50 a minute? Then there's distribution. Radio stations cost over $1 million to build. There are FCC licenses. Vinyl record manufacturers also were expensive, and advertising. What you had was a huge demand constrained by a bottleneck in distribution. The recording industry was still working from expensive high-voltage devices, while the public was beginning to consume it on 9-volt throwaway electronics. Lucky for you, recording industry started to become affordable in the 1980s. So what's changed today? It depends on your reference point. If your reference point is human history until the 1930s, really nothing has changed. Before the 1930s, there was a bottleneck between distribution and players. Everyone who's musical played and their friends and family listened. Sure, there were exceptional talents and they had concerts as we had today. I remember that when I was very, very young. From the 1930s until 1990s, there was an adjustment period as home and portable electronics dealt with the supply problem. The problem of recording music was that it was still expensive. Once it became inexpensive like today, music went back to being more of a hobby than a profession, as it was for most of human history. The bottleneck between production and consumption of the 1960s to the 1990s is what created the illusion that the best music was produced. It was for those who were young at the time, but soon they will die. As good as much of that music is, it will go the way of Bing Crosby. Music will continue as it has for most of human history, spread out, some of it timeless, most of it forgotten. We weren't special back then. We lived in the right time and place where some musicians were wildly successful as the lucky ones who were picked to record. I'm happy I lived at that time. Again, let me point out, the listening technology was horrible. Not the recording technology. It was just expensive. Steely Dan's music today would not be improved in a digital studio because it was never about analog or digital. It was about how you used the equipment, the isolation of instruments, etc. You know all that. Now that both the recording and playing equipment is at the same level, there's no benefit to an expensive recording studio. It's all back to the musician's age-old problem of getting someone more interested in what they play or sing than what they can sing themselves. It used to be there was a piano in every house. Now everyone with an interest in music has a home studio of some sort. The future has become the past.